She didn't ask for respect, she earned it one wrench at a time. But on this job site, none of that mattered. They saw her skin, her gender, and laughed. "She'll break it before she fixes it," one muttered. Another bet she wouldn't last an hour. What they didn't know was this engine wasn't just another job. It was her test, her moment, her proof. So when the machine finally roared back to life, it didn't just turn over steel. It shut down every voice that ever doubted her. What happened in that garage left them speechless. It started like any other Monday. Quesa arrived at the auto shop 15 minutes early, as always, grease under her nails, tools in hand, and a quiet fire in her chest. She had built her name slowly through double shifts, sleepless nights, and solving problems even senior techs couldn't. But in this new shop, none of that mattered. She was the only woman, the only black mechanic, and from day one they made sure she felt it. Jokes about affirmative action, side eyes when she spoke, tools that mysteriously went missing from her bench. Still, she kept her head down, not because she lacked confidence, but because she knew how this worked. In this world, excellence wasn't enough, she had to be undeniable. Then one morning, everything shifted. A rare luxury car was towed in, engine completely seized, electronic diagnostics failing. Even the lead mechanics shook their heads. "Total loss," they said, "no one here can fix it." The owner, frustrated and desperate, made a bold offer. "I'll pay $100,000 to anyone who gets this thing running again." Laughter broke out across the garage. The bet was a joke to most, but Quesa stepped forward silent. No one offered her the job, no one believed she could do it. But she took it anyway. The moment Quesa touched the car, the whispers began. "Better hope she doesn't blow it up. Let her try, might be good for a laugh." She heard every word, pretended not to, but the weight of their mockery pressed down on her with every step she took toward the lift. The car was a limited edition European import, rare, temperamental, and unfamiliar to most mechanics. The kind of engine that required not just knowledge, but intuition. And Quesa had both. She spent hours with it, no manuals, no help. Just her, the machine, and a gut feeling built from years of problem-solving cars others had given up on. She didn't rush. She listened, literally. She placed her ear to the hood, hands tracing wires and lines like she was reading Braille. Still, the obstacles mounted. The diagnostic systems refused to sync. The engine control module was corrupted. Half the shop snickered as she manually traced the harnesses, something none of them had the patience or know-how to do. Others made bets behind her back, how long before she gave up. But Quesa didn't break. She worked through lunch, stayed after hours. She brought in her old textbooks, cross-referenced diagrams, and even called up an old instructor who once told her she could outwork any man in the business. Each failure taught her something new, each mistake brought her closer. And finally, on the third day, she found it. A fault buried deep in the car's firmware, a flaw no one else had thought to look for. Using a makeshift bypass she designed herself, she reset the system. But that was only half the battle. Now came the test. With the battery reconnected, oil topped, and the team gathering behind her like vultures waiting for a crash, Quesa slid into the driver's seat. One breath, one key turn. The engine hesitated, then roared to life. Loud, clean, perfect. The same mechanics who had laughed just hours earlier stood in stunned silence. Some stared, one dropped his coffee. Quesa didn't gloat, she didn't even smile. She just stepped out, wiped her hands on her rag, and walked away. But the silence behind her said everything. The roar of that engine cut through the garage like a thunderclap, sharp, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. Quesa stood there silent, while the machine she'd resurrected purred behind her like a lion finally let loose. No one spoke, no one moved. The same men who had mocked her, bet against her, dismissed her entirely, were now frozen in place, as if the sound had knocked the breath out of them. The car's owner rushed over, disbelief written all over his face. He stared at the dashboard, watched the readings level out, then turned to Quesa. "Oh, you did it." She gave a single nod, no bragging, no need, the work spoke for itself. He didn't hesitate, reached into his briefcase and pulled out a signed check, 6 figures, her name already written on it. Behind her, someone scoffed, "She just got lucky." But another voice, quieter, broke through, "No, that was skill." That was all Quesa needed, not their approval, but the silence that followed, the absence of laughter. The stunned realization that everything they thought about her, every bias, every stereotype, had just been shattered by her brilliance. For a moment she let it sink in, not the money, not the praise, but the shift, the power of proving them all wrong without saying a word. She'd spent years being underestimated, passed over, ignored. But not today. Today the engine spoke louder than any insult ever could. Quesa didn't stay long after that. She packed her tools, thanked the owner, and walked out with her head high and a check that could change her life. But the real reward wasn't the money. It was the silence, the way the room had shifted, the way those who once laughed now looked at her like they were seeing her for the first time. They hadn't changed overnight, maybe they never would, but something had cracked. A moment had been created one they couldn't unsee. And that was the power of what she'd done. Quesa had spent her career battling two things: the complexity of machines and the weight of judgment. She knew the gears, the codes, the diagnostics, but she also knew the looks, the whispers, the assumptions that came the second they saw a black woman in overalls. She didn't argue with them, she didn't try to change their minds with words. She let her work speak. And in that garage on that day, her work was louder than prejudice, louder than doubt, louder than every barrier they thought would stop her. It wasn't just a victory for her, it was a statement. How many others are overlooked before they even get the chance to prove themselves? How many Quesas are out there, underestimated simply because of who they are? It's not enough to just give someone a chance. You have to stop assuming they're not capable to begin with. Because brilliance doesn't always look the way you expect. And when you finally hear it roar to life, you'll wonder why you ever doubted it in the first place.